Good afternoon to those in the UK, good evening to those in Japan, and a warm welcome back to the first of these quarterly Japan Society webinars for 2026. We are delighted, as always, to host these events with Asia Society Tokyo. I am Bill Emmett. I'm an honorary vice chair of the Japan Society, and it's my great pleasure to moderate these Japan Macro Salons, reviewing the latest trends in Japan's economy, financial markets, and corporate world, and of course, how those trends affect and are affected by global events. As our regular attendees know, every quarter in these salons, to discuss these issues, I'm joined by our good friend Jesper Koll. Jesper is well known as a self-described Japan optimist, but also as for more than 3 decades, one of the highest rated economists and strategists in Japan. Jesper has worked with the best, including JP Morgan and Merrill Lynch, and is now an expert director at the Monex Group, as well as a board director at the Okinawa Institute for Science and Technology, and an advisor, of course, to us all. We are also, as always, being joined by a special guest, who this time is one of the most senior figures from Japanese business and one of the most well-known around the world. Takeshi Niinami. Niinami-san is a former chairman of Suntory Holdings and a former chair of the Keizai Doyukai, this prestigious business association for senior executives. Niinami-san began his career at Mitsubishi Corporation, and in fact, I recall first meeting him when he was running Mitsubishi's Lawson convenience store group, which he ran from 2002 until he joined Suntory in 2014. He has also served as a senior economic advisor to several prime ministers, including Prime Minister Takaichi. As regular viewers know, I begin these webinars by picking Jesper's brains about recent economic trends, and then we'll bring in our special guest for a wider conversation, which will, I'm sure, cover the news about the snap election that Takaichi-san is about to announce. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit questions at any time during the Q&A, using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and to vote for others' questions to bring them more quickly to my attention. So, Jesper, what parts of the economic background for 2026, but also for the election campaign, do we really need all to understand? Inflation, real wages, corporate investment, the yen, the stock market. What's your top pick?
It's very interesting, Bill, because I'm reminded of the trend is your friend. And as you know, I've been very, very focused on the corporate metabolism. That you really have the Japanese domestic corporate sector, as well as the global sector, the manufacturing sector, as well as the large companies and the small and medium-sized companies. Everybody's on fire. You find that, we continue to get record announcement of MBA, of LBOs activities. The latest Tankan that came out in early December, again, confirming that domestic business investment expenditure keeps on increasing at almost double-digit paces, which is now the 3rd year that business investment expenditure is increasing. And by the way, it's very interesting because in America, business investment expenditure is extremely lopsided, dominated by AI-related investments, while when you look through the data in Japan, it's actually very broad-based. It goes from small and medium-sized companies all the way up to the big guys throughout all sectors, whether it's the chemical sector, whether it's the paper sector, you name it. There is really the animal spirits, as it were, of corporate Japan are very, very much alive. And then the other statistics I just want to again highlight to people. I was actually almost shocked because last year in 2025, 7% of listed companies received a takeover bid.
Right.
And when you look at the data, I mean, that was basically non-existent, in the past. So this market for corporate control is really on fire here in Japan. So from that perspective, I think, we are, entering 2026 with great momentum that looks likely to probably even accelerate a little bit further. And I think that, you do find that demand because of business investment expenditure increasing, demand also because the metabolism in the labor market continues to be very, very strong. That as a result of that, you're not going to have a consumer-led recovery because inflation remains the number one, number two, number three concern of the Japanese people. And we've now had, almost a year and a half of negative real wage growth, but the combination of the corporate metabolism plus corporations investing in human capital actually does get, us onto a good starting ramp for 2026.
Now, one of the things that I suppose one learned as a cub reporter was that never to mistake the stock market for the economy. What you have, the picture that you described, is, so we say, in some senses, a surprising combination: rising investment, strong stock market, but also high inflation and possibly accelerating inflation, and a weak yen. I mean, the falling yen. How do you just reconcile those for me briefly?
So let us be, a little bit scientific, and just run regressions and figure out, well, what is the sensitivity of corporate earnings for listed companies to the exchange rate? And what you find, and you can go, different economists come up with basically similar answers. For every 10 yen of yen depreciation, you are generating about 8 percentage points of windfall profits for listed companies, right? Yeah. And this is just the way the mathematics works, right? That's just the way history works. And you find, for example, that increasingly non-manufacturing companies, whether it is Aeon, the retailer, whether it is Daiichi Life, you find that 60-70% of their earnings is actually generated from their global enterprises, from their global ventures. So from that perspective, why is the stock market going up? It is perfectly correct to say that, well, the yen weakens, therefore the stock market goes up because you get windfall earnings that are going to be generated from that perspective. And one final comment, Bill, because there is all this hoopla about, oh my God, the tariffs, what are the tariffs going to do? And you find that the tariffs have been swallowed, as it were, by Japanese corporations. Look at cars, which is one of the biggest exports to the United States. You find that export unit car prices to the United States are down exactly 15% since the start of the tariff. So it's very clear that Mr. and Mrs. Toyota, is basically absorbing this into their margins. And, the net effect, however, is this causing big damage to the profitability of Toyota? The answer is no, because their volume assumptions had been very, very conservative. Plus, you've got the windfall from yen depreciation. So for all intents and purposes, you find that corporate earnings in Japan are actually continuing to be in an upward revision phase, which again is obviously something that excites, people who invest in stock markets.
And just final question before we introduce our guest. I mean, inflation and interest rates. Perhaps we ought to just briskly look at that. I mean, in the surprises piece that you wrote recently in the Japan Times and elsewhere, you said one potential surprise could be Japan being, unfortunately, the inflation champion, accelerating inflation. How big a risk is this?
I think it's actually my base case scenario. I think that, you find that, the bottlenecks that you've got in the Japanese economy, and it's not just the labor market, right? It's also the market for construction materials, for example, right? It's not just food prices, but it is, actual service prices now starting to be bid up. And, interestingly, when you look, for example, at the Tankan survey, you actually find that small and medium-sized companies in the non-manufacturing sector, in the service sector, are actually gaining pricing power. So from that perspective, we've actually seen Governor Ueda over the last 4 or 5 weeks, sort of changing his tone, if you read the tea leaves, right, of how the wording of his public commentary goes. They have become more conservative. And I do actually think that this time next year, we are going to have Japanese policy rates not at the current 0.75%, but at 1.75%.
Wow. Wow. That's quite, that's, well, that would, I would consider that to be a very good news if that were to happen,
It,
personally.
it is actually extremely good news for Japanese financials. Is it fast enough to actually prevent a further steepening yield curve? I think the answer probably is no.
Right. Right. Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
let me now ask our guest to turn on his video. If Niinami-san could join us, that would be great. Welcome to the Japan Society.
Hi, thank you, Bill.
Very good to have you with us, and thank you for. It's now, thanks to the 9 hour time change, it's quite a time difference. It's quite late in Tokyo, so thank you as well as the audience for being with us. Now, maybe to start off, obviously we've had the economic background from Jesper. We have a political background, which is an election being contemplated likely for February. Um, the prime minister's popularity ratings are, with the public are very high, impressive, well over 70%. My kind of instinct, given both the US-China position and some of the economic background, is that her popularity ratings with business may not be quite as high as that. How do you see the election prospects and also the position currently pre-election of a minority government with Japanese business leadership?
Hi, thank you for inviting me to this fantastic, wonderful occasion. Um, it's not surprising that Prime Minister Takaichi will call for a snap election. I'm sure that she's pretty much confident that LDP will win. And I think LDP will win. But to what extent is a good question. She is trying to reach out to the 233, which is at least to get the majority, and hopefully she wants to get a stable majority so that she doesn't have to be bothered by the coalition party. So at most, I think she can reach to the level of the stable a majority. I think if she can manage the coalition in the election with the Kometo, I'm sure that she's trying to find any kind of path to work with the Kometo. Unless she can get the support from Kometo's support, I think urban areas, LDP can't win. And
Right.
what if they hadn't had any support from Kometo to the previous election, which is upper house? They could have lost more than 60 seats, which is amazing. So I think for her, Kometo is more important than the Restoration Party, as a matter of fact, because the Restoration Party is confined only to Osaka area.
Yes.
So I think she is somehow working with the Kometo because Kometo said uh, they are working with any party, including LDP. So it's up to the Takaichi-san's effort to be able to get the support from Kometo. I think to some extent, I think she can make that happen. So at this moment, I think LDP can win up until toward the 233, which is a majority.
And with
It's
that,
because of her popularity.
yes.
It's not popularity of LDP, which is still 40%.
And but perhaps for both of you, Jesper and Niinami-san, I mean, let's base this on the assumption that you're right, that she does get the LDP back above that majority on its own. how much different, how good a news is that from an economic policy point of view, from a from a business perspective, for either of you? I mean, what is really is the agenda that can be carried out with that majority, which is otherwise much more difficult to do? How should we understand the potential impact of the restoration of a lower house majority for the LDP to be in economic and business terms?
May I?
Yes, yeah, I mean,
I think Japan's general public needs definitely clear vision, clear action, swiftly. We don't want to have the slow action like the former prime ministers, perhaps. Well, I don't want to raise names, but whether it's right or not, quick and determination is
yes.
needed by the general public. So I think gaining the majority, I think Takaichi can take very quick action to make her policies realize, such as giving support to the people in need, like getting delivery of cash. So I think in the short term, I think she can uh, put forward her policies very quickly. I think that's needed for the Japan's economy. As a matter of fact, Japan's economy is said to be pretty much a bit weaker than we'd expected. So we need a very, very quick action taker.
And Jesper, you have generally been positive about that aspect of Prime Minister Takaichi, of the decisiveness,
No,
which
look,
you've seen.
no, absolutely. And I think that, obviously the election is a bit of a gamble. I think that from an economic policy perspective, the interesting thing about Takaichi is that she has not really enunciated or sort of stood up for something that actually deals with the supply side. When you actually look at the budget, for example, I mean, it could have been almost any prime minister, right? Who sort of put together this budget, in terms of real initiatives to, accelerate supply side reform, whether it's in agricultural policy, whether it is in industrial policy. That so far she hasn't really done that. She's very cautious. I had several meetings with her in the past where she literally asked me, does Japan need 7 car companies? And so this idea of creating national champions, I think theoretically she understands it, which a lot of us do. But the reality is you're now the prime minister. Will you actually use your political capital to actually implement supply side reforms that sometimes go against the vested interest of the people? And, that's where it's very, very interesting. Before the election, she is not going to come out with a supply side reform package. Will she do so if she wins a sizable selection? Will she actually free herself from the old doctrines of the LDP elders, which basically focus more on gradualism and on incremental change and protecting vested interests rather than actually forcing, as Niinami-san, hinted at, more decisive action to actually, create those national champions that Japan needs.
And Niinami-san, you're an advisor to the Prime Minister, as you have been to many prime ministers. I mean, you certainly have her ear, at least when you can speak to her. What if she gets this majority? What would you want her to set as her one uh, priorities? A couple of kind of economic priorities that would be really important to you and to business.
Bill, first of all, I'm not advising now Prime Minister Takaichi. Up until Ishiba from Prime Minister Abe, Kishida, and Suga and Ishiba. So as perhaps you know, I stepped down from the CEOs and then
Yes.
I resigned. So having said that, totally agree with the Jesper because the long-term economic policy of Ms. Takaichi, Prime Minister Takaichi, is totally wrong, I believe. But in terms of, we don't hire the at this moment, we should not hire the Abenomics 2.0. We just need the, third arrow. We don't need a fiscal policy. We don't need a, monetary policy to pick up our economy. Definitely, we have to go back to the textbook because we are in an inflationary scenario, totally. At the time of Abenomics, totally deep deflation. So we
Yes.
need reform. But she talked about reform like social welfare and so forth. I thought that that's great. But as Jesper mentioned, before the election, she changed her mind because she needs to win the election. And I hoped that she will have the strong fight against the Doctor Association of Japan, which is a dinosaur, I think, and plus the SME, association, because we have to get rid of the so many zombies and metabolism and consolidation. That's the way to go for Japan to gain their competitiveness in the world. She knows it, but she can't do it because she is the head of LDP. That's why she and the other prime ministers, they know the economic policy should be, but because of the constraint of Japan's, the political arena, they can't make that happen. So
No.
they don't listen to me.
No, so reforms, supply side reforms really is what they should be focusing on. As you say, in Abe speak, the third arrow, which was never really fired properly, not at least according to the textbooks anyway, and control of inflation are the two things that you would suggest. Yes,
Bill,
let's go on.
I'm
No,
so sorry to interrupt.
please.
To be honest, for the sake of the former Prime Minister Abe, there was a third arrow. There
Yes,
was a TPP. I
yes,
supported him, and I visited Washington, D.C. to convince a lot of the Republicans. But the U.S. walked away, and
yes.
he changed his mind to go for the geopolitics. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, but that is a correct historical corrective to my point. So
Thank
thank
you.
Now,
yes,
what
well,
is what is very interesting, and this is the key point that also you just have to emphasize. Japan is in an inflationary cycle. The output gap is closed. Inflation is a problem. Inflation is everywhere, and it's not just because of the weak yen. So the question is, how do we get supply side reform? Now, of course, you and I always want to have political leadership and vision and all this wonderful stuff. On the other hand, you actually now do have markets doing their job. The fact that the zombie companies cannot attract labor, the fact that even the median, sort of the middle of the road companies, right, are losing labor, because they get bid away by other companies. This scarcity of labor, together with rising interest rates, together with the Bank of Japan having withdrawn its lending program, to zombie companies. So capitalism is coming to Japan. Yes, we'd like to have a little bit more leadership and get from 7 car companies to 3 car companies, right? But, is it going to happen? The answer is yes, it will happen anyways because of the market forces coming through. And let's not forget, and Niinami-san, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Private equity, obviously plays a big game now in Japan. There's loads and loads of capital ready to be deployed. What is your view on sort of American style financialization and private equity doing the dirty work of industrial consolidation?
I totally like it. I spoke to the FT that we should welcome activists because some CEOs are well advanced in terms of accepting the reform. And we have the, I would say, dichotomy between good ones and bad ones, or in the future, we will see the winners and losers in the market. And that goes to the consolidation. I think that's good. But the government gives the subsidies,
Yes.
especially to SMEs. So government is blocking the function of the market. That's the Japan's problem. The government should let our private sector go. I think that should create the industry competitiveness of Japan. By the way, I totally agree that the trend is toward what you were talking about. So I think we should welcome the private equity from the rest of the world. I mean, the US and the UK and so forth. I think they will get a lot of business chances, and that's good for Japan's restructuring its economic, foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what is interesting, what I would like to see is to see, to see more domestic private equity firms. I mean, there's a couple, but they don't have the scale. They don't have the global network. Obviously, the American companies, predominantly some Europeans, they've got an advantage because they've got a global network. But it would be good to see whether it's on the activist side or on the private equity side to see more domestic players starting to come into the market.
I totally agree. We see so many emerging players, medium-sized and small-sized, to target the even small, medium-sized, because small, medium-sized, they are losing the passion. And but business per se is pretty much attractive. And Japan's business structure is pretty much based on the SMEs in terms of manufacturing sectors. I think those SMEs are so important, but they are losing, successors, and they are losing their targets or future bright future plans. So I think Japan's private equity, they have a role to play to consolidate good guys of the SMEs, definitely. But I'm afraid Japanese PE can play a key role to merge such as Nissan, Honda.
One of the questions that's come in was about the amount from Amripal Gill about the amount of cash that Japanese businesses have been famously accumulating on their balance sheets over the last 30 years. Now, I think declining the amount of cash on balance sheets, but his question is how resilient they were as a result of this cash. My supplement to that question is this cash going to be released for the activist, for this takeover activity, for M&A, for this reallocation process that you're both welcoming and indeed calling and cheering on?
So it's very interesting because the gentleman is absolutely right. One of the inflection points last year, for the first time in almost 20 years, you had the cash balances of listed companies actually going down.
Yeah.
Where's the money going? Now you've got a continued record amount of share buybacks. So it's no question that the equity holders are now an intricate part of the stakeholder system that the bulk of the firms are managing for. But the interesting thing is that business investment expenditure, is actually increasing very nicely. So it's not just shareholders, it's also trying to make the companies better by investing in the future.
That's right. I think because the lack of labor, that is a big trigger for digital investment and AI investment. But I would urge Prime Minister Takaichi, after the election, she's work on deregulation, because a 30-year sleep, no prime minister tried to deregulate the market. And that's why there's a huge opportunity for the investors to input a lot of cash to the new frontiers, including startups and entrepreneurs. Three prime ministers started to say, we need startups, but we need to deregulate the market, which means, for example, we have to crack down the Japan's Association of Medical Doctors, for example. That's a deadlock. and invested the right players, there's a huge potential for Japan to receive, investors because we haven't done anything in the space of deregulation. Look
Mm,
at the Uber. We could not
mm.
make that happen in Japan.
Right, absolutely. No, that's right. Yes, I mean, many people have wanted to break down the power of the medical association, and few have lived to tell the tale. So I look forward. I mean, that would be a major step forward if that could happen. I mean, we will come on, I'm sure, to U.S. China in a few minutes, but let me ask you both first of all about artificial intelligence. As Jesper said, the corporate investment in the US has been highly geared towards AI data centers and all of that. That's much less true in Japan, but you have, as it were, government planning of AI. With the labor shortage, there's a clear need for artificial intelligence to deal with to get productivity increased and to substitute for labor. What are both your expectations? I mean, Inami-san, what do you think about corporate adoption and adaptation of artificial intelligence? Is this an exciting trend in Japan, or is it frustrating to you?
Well, the latter. I think physical AI is needed for Japan, such as to replace the, uh, I think, helpers, the care workers for the elderly population. And we need to bring more people from abroad. But we have to think about what to do with the physical AI. And last year, 2 years ago, we imported 1,000 units of humanoid robotics from China. And this is a really important fact that can we continue or not? But can we produce humanoid robotics using the AI, physical AI? I don't think we can make that happen. And do we have a lot of time to make that happen? I don't think so. So we definitely work with the United States or other players, Korea, Taiwan perhaps, and with India. We have to set up the global international supply chain to create the humanoid robotics production supply chain. In that case, how can we talk with President Trump? Because President Trump wants to produce in the United States, but the production in itself is not a good, I mean, their strength in the United States. So how we can work together to produce physical AI plus good brains from the United States. I think definitely you have to make that happen. And that's for the sake of security, for the sake of Western allies. And definitely we can secure chips from Taiwan, as a matter of fact, for example.
Jesper, what do you think about physical AI?
I think I probably need it. It would make me run a little faster. No, but all joking aside, I think that you know the you know 15, 18 years ago, you don't know the exact, Japan was a clear leader in physical robotics. And also, in humanoid robotics. But over the last 10, 15 years, it's clearly been surpassed, by, particularly the People's Republic of China. And, when you look at the AI policy that the government announced in December, it is very, very focused on humans first. It is not the sort of, oh, let the tech dreamers take over and come up, and then we regulate it after the effect. They want to regulate it before the effect, so that the human-centric part of AI, and always, I always feel that in Japan, AI does not stand for artificial intelligence, but stands for augmented intelligence in terms of how does the machine work together with human beings, rather than, the idea of, oh, we're going to have a dark factory where there's only going to be humanoid robots. So it's quite interesting. It's a measured approach, and I don't think that Japan ever is going to be a leader in that field. In terms of specific applications, however, when I go and visit companies, I'm very, very impressed, because, very, very specific forms, whether it's, how do I cut my egg sandwich in a better way, having that figured out by some AI complexity, and the Kaizen type implementation, you actually do see in many more companies than shows up in the media.
Niinami-san, do you think that there is a lot of adoption in that Kaizen type way that you're seeing do corporate leaders see the potential of that? I mean, I recognize very much the robotics and humanoid physical infrastructure requirement, but do you see companies doing what Jesper's saying and adapting AI to resolve complexity?
I think, first of all, AI is a tool to increase the productivity. And because of lack of labor, that is a big trigger, as I mentioned earlier. But it's not creating a new frontier in this country. So
Exactly.
definitely, we have to raise a sense of urgency. And I don't want to talk, I don't want to give a lecture for an hour why we don't have the sense of urgency in this country.
No.
Because there's a huge repute from the academia that we can go for the dual use. Dual use is so important. Military and industry, we have to work together. And nowadays, we have to invest to the military or weapons or security. In doing so, definitely industry and academia have to work together. But a sense of urgency promotes the academia to accept the dual use. But in our country, academia doesn't accept the dual use. Dual use is needed to promote innovation like human robotics, but it's not allowed. Only one university, Hokkaido, Tora is so much against. So how to convince professors to work on dual use? That's a huge, huge headache now.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely right. And this historic division, I mean, between military and civil applications inside the university communities is definitely a huge barrier that needs to be overcome if Japan is to achieve its military, its defense and security goals, let alone some of the other research and development applications that we're talking about. I think that is a big obstacle to be overcome.
Bill, can I just give you a fact on that? Of
Yes.
the American military budget, about 16% goes to R&D. Of the Japanese defense budget, it's less than 1%.
Is that right? 16 to 1.
Well, as a matter of fact, the 60% goes to the payroll.
Yeah.
Now it's 70%.
Exactly.
So, but as a matter of fact, a lot of countries as well, and we have to spend to the technology, but technology means a dual use.
Yes.
How to convince? Nowadays, it's easier than before, but a sense of urgency, lack of a sense of urgency started after the security pact with the United States because Japan threw away how to protect our country by technology. So it's a long story, but we have to get rid of it.
Now,
which gets into another crux of the matter that certainly at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology as well as at Tokyo University, Keio University, everybody is struggling with, which is the IP. Who owns the intellectual property? If you're a professor operating in a research lab, at a university, which is where even in the UK, Cambridge, Oxford, some of the other universities, certainly in the United States, I mean, they've got that pat down. It's a business. Right? Dual use is a business that links science with innovation, and with both the balance between carrots and sticks worked out very, very well. In Japan, it's not, and there's a lot of legal work that needs to be done actually.
Yeah, that's why I think CPTPP should have the AI regulation as well, the AI promotion, to have the standards which are high, and we should revise CPTPP to adopt the AI applications, and we definitely have to work on division of roles. amongst the countries. And Japan is still the flag bearer of the free trade, promoting CPTPP. So Japan has lots of problems like a lack of sense of urgency, but international coordination is to promote Japan to work on security things as well as working together with for example, Korea, which doesn't have any stigma to the dual use, for example. So we have to have international coordination, and we have to boost the expansionary CPTPP world so that we can prosper together. And we should bring in EU, not only the UK.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I agree. I live in an EU country, Ireland, but I'm a British citizen, so therefore I would back both of those horses in that race. And definitely, well, I mean, yeah, and Jesper recently wrote a very positive piece about Japan's potential to be an honest broker
Oh,
in
it sounds good.
stimulating a lot of this progress in international institutions and rules and collaboration as a
Yeah.
country that is admired, trusted, but not feared.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's
and
right.
and I think that's absolutely right. There is that, but it requires real political determination to achieve it. Now, I better not lose more time before I bring you on to both onto U.S. China. Sorry, Japan China, which is then part of
US,
the
China,
context
no.
of U.S. China. Japan-China relations. Clearly, a lot of the background to the Takeichi premiership so far, at least in the international media, has been shaped by the tensions with China and predictions that tourism is going to fall this year. Inward tourism is going to fall, even albeit only by a few percentage points, is all to do with with Japan-China. How, first of all, Niinami-san, and then Jesper, how do you see the impact of this Japan-China tension? Is this important from a business point of view, or is it noise in a way compared with the basic drivers for business in that trading relationship?
Let me touch upon maybe two things. One is a reflection from the hawkish actions from China to Japan. One, definitely, this time we have to think about our posture too much relying on the United States because there is no backup from the US. All of a sudden, China became so much, bashing to us without any considerate, kind of preservation.
Right.
This is true.
No,
And then,
you've not had backup from President Trump.
no, no.
No.
So it's been a while since we were engaging with China, but always we had a backup. So we have to find our own strategy. I don't know now, but we have to change our posture. That's first of thing. Second, China is a very, very important trading partner. We have to find any kind of path to be able to communicate with the China.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, business leaders are planning to go to Beijing this month, but that was rejected, and we gave it up. I thought that Beijing wants to keep the dialogue with the business of Japan, but they kick it out. So they determined not to engage even business of Japan.
Really?
So this is a so big, message from Beijing. So we got to have the anyway communication through business because both know we are intertwined relation. We are in the relation. And the US, I think the Chinese economy is still waning and the price increase is now zero. And they are suffering deflationary scenario we've been going through. And so we have to have any kind of mutual interest anyway in business. That's a first step. And plus, I think Ms. Takaichi must repeatedly talk about the Japan's stance about Taiwan. China is only one country. She has to repeatedly talk to China, and she has to make it clear in front of even President Trump when she meets the president in Washington, D.C. next month. Well, I think in March, perhaps.
Yes, but what do you think? I mean, in some ways, the Chinese attacks on Japan, while they've been quite persistent, they haven't actually been all that severe, in my view, except on the tourism industry and seafood. But how seriously do you see it? I mean, in other words, this is a long drawn out, and there's definitely not the backing from the US that Japan has been used to. But in some ways, I've been a bit surprised that actually China hasn't been nastier.
Right. Well, it's very interesting. I think, like, just to underscore Niinami-san's point, around 9% of listed companies' earnings come from dealing with the People's Republic of China. So it's very important. It's around 15% that come from the United States of America. So, I mean, America is bigger, but that's also because the yen has been weak against the renminbi. But so the 72% of the imports from the People's Republic of China are intermediate goods that are used by Japanese companies for final assembly, for the final, cut that happens here in Japan. So the economies are linked at the hip. And as Niinami-san says, I personally, I must say, I'm a little bit almost shocked at how broad and how persistent, the sort of trying to cut Japan out, because of, these remarks, that happen. So how are we going to get back on firmer ground? How are we going to get constructive? And exactly as Niinami-san points out, the fact that the United States of America is playing its own game, leaving its most trusted partner in Asia Pacific, basically out in the cold. Wow. What does that do? That means that the animal spirits and the drive for we must become more independent, not just in security, that's an obvious one, but also in terms of securing our own supply chains, right? Outside of the US corridor, outside of the US network. So it has backfired on so many different ways, but it is positive because it does create that sense of urgency that Niinami-san, is looking for.
Great.
Yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. But urgency to do what? How do you create those supply chains? What really are the action plans that you can do to deal with these two elephants that you are bargaining with, the America and China?
Right. Well,
I mean, go ahead, Niinami-san. Dozo.
I think definitely some ASEAN countries are wondering, to what extent can they rely on China?
Yes.
They are not relying on the United States. They think it's gone. And what about India, for example? Still 80% of crude oil going to China is through the Indian Ocean. So that part is so important. And India and Japan can elaborate so that the Indian economy will be growing faster, such as bringing more manufacturing, facilities in India, so that we can support Prime Minister Modi for his advocate that making India. So I think definitely we can work with the other countries so that China's action is pretty much not creating further tension. And let's work together, and then I think we can resolve. But we can't rely on the U.S. to bridge us and China.
That's clear. That's absolutely clear.
I mean, Bill, it's actually very interesting because, I mean, obviously Takaichi-san just went to Korea. right? When you look at what has happened over the last 3 months in terms of Australia and Japan, deals done
Yes.
on securing, natural resources, as well as the reciprocity, the Japanese selling some of their arms, some of the
Yes.
frigates, some of the ships, to Australia. So the whole irony is, that if China or America attempt to isolate any one country, particularly when you do that with Japan, it actually turbocharges the alliance building that was sort of laid out anyways already, under the, Indo-Free Pacific, concept, right? Which came into the Quad, but now the Quad is going to be without the Americans pretty soon. But Japan is gonna, step up its efforts there.
And Jesper, I think, as I mentioned earlier, EU and the UK both are so important. I mean, European, effort to pick up its, independence in terms of supply chain, weapons and whatsoever. What is the meaning of independence? I think as long as we can work together and each one has their own strength, which means independence. So it doesn't mean we don't trade each other. So EU is so important for Japan and the Asian countries so that we can have certain leverage to talk to the big guys. And that means China and the United States.
And I would certainly say that from a European point of view, Japan, Southeast Asia, and India are very important to them too. I mean, it is very much a mutual recognition of that imperative that follows on from what you say, Niinami-san. Let me pick up one or two of the questions that have come in. Some excellent questions. One question is about corporate governance,
Hmm.
which is something that Jesper and I have talked about often in these seminars. The progress that's been made, the stewardship codes, and all of that. Gary Stanton asks, what will be the impact of Takaichi on corporate governance reforms? In the past, she said that companies should use cash for employees, not just focus on shareholder returns. Politicians say a lot of different things. What they do is what is really tends to matter. How do you see it? Maybe first start with you on this one, Jesper. Do you see the progress towards in corporate governance to just continuing?
Yeah, I think again, I mean, politicians say a lot of things, but I think that the focus of the reforms being led by the Tokyo Stock Exchange, being led, by the Japan Asset Management Associations, by the Pension Association. I mean, that ship has sailed. You can always argue what is the optimum level of a share buyback, what is the optimum level of a dividend. Be my guest, but the market, is there, and that's I think is basically irreversible coming through. On corporate governance, I think we are entering a completely different and new stage, which is that you've got national economic security starting to come into the way, where you've got prospects of de facto nationalizations of governments, taking bigger stakes in corporations. I mean, it's an open secret that it's not, but that's actually public information. The U.S. What is that thing called now? The Department of War, the Pentagon, has a $200 billion fund to invest significant equity stakes in international companies that are deemed to be of essential national economic security interest for the United States of America. And they were in Tokyo in December, shopping around with 5 or 6 companies, trying to buy good, big, significant equity stakes. Is that going to be allowed? How do I, as the board member of a Japanese electronics company, how do I deal with, Washington wanting to buy a 10% stake in my company? That's the real test of corporate governance going forward, given that we've moved on to effectively a world war economy.
How do you see it, Niinami-san?
I want to talk about just a very little thing, but it's so important. In South Downs, the quality of outside board members is pretty poor. And we have to develop, first of all, good quality. And so, which means we are, I think, shifting to the really good direction. In substance, definitely the board should function much further. In that sense, definitely we have to take a look at each member of the board members. And definitely one should be definitely incumbent chairman of a business or CEO. Otherwise, the board cannot function. And don't bring a consultant, for example. Don't bring the kanryo, I think, bureaucrats. And sometimes too many. Definitely one business leader must sit as the board member. And they are too busy. But you have to convince at least one to make the board really functionable.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
one more thing, perhaps we should have a big case. I'm so disappointed that the Seven and I now its corporate value is so down after the Canadian player came to the scene, and I was so excited that that would happen. That should happen. And we need a big case of real good function of the
Mm.
board to resolve issues for the sake of the creating the value of a company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And perhaps, I mean, maybe one of the surprises for that you might have considered and didn't put in, Jesper, would be a big case like that happening. We got
Well, look, it is interesting because I mean, just to be aggressive for 30 seconds. I mean, it is happening with Hitachi. Hitachi has got arguably one of the best boards in the world, and Hitachi, in terms of creating corporate value and restructuring and focusing on core competence, while maintaining, absolute excellence in engineering, Hitachi is the poster child. Certainly way better than, what is that thing called? US Steel.
Yes, but can I challenge to you a little bit?
Sure.
And I think we have to reflect what happened to Sony, what happened to Hitachi. We'd known that the company would be in a bad situation, knowing that we could not take any action beforehand. So we have to share the wisdom, knowing that the company is, I think, climbing down, the hill, knowing that we have to take preemptive action, proactive action. So Japan must learn from history, and we have to use the wisdom. So that's why I talked about Seven I. Perhaps I should raise the case of Nissan, for example. We know Nissan is in bad situation and getting worse, and the
Yeah.
board must take some kind of action.
Yeah,
Maybe
indeed.
they
Now,
should they should merge with Meti. No, but all
So
joking
that's why
aside,
I'm talking about Hitachi case.
yeah, yeah,
Hitachi, Sony both got better, but they didn't know they were so bad. After then, they took action.
yeah.
That's
It's
a
it's in,
shame.
it's interesting. I actually think for 2026, watch Fanuc, the robotics company, which clearly had fallen behind, and let's see whether they can actually engineer a comeback. And the same is true for Murata Seisakusho,
Mm,
to see whether those companies, which have been hurt and the competitive pressure from China is continuing to increase, whether they can actually do not just Kaizen, but actually Kaikaku, actual reforms, so that they have another 50 years of a bright future. Because right now, they're just going to get crushed by China,
yeah,
right?
right. I'm saying that we are so potential because we know what to do with the, how to go through this, difficult times.
Right.
And we should learn, from cases like Hitachi, Sony. We could, we made it happen. So we should have done much earlier then.
no,
And
I,
we
I,
can,
I
we
think
can.
that that's absolutely right. I absolutely vividly remember having actually two young employees of Hitachi visit me in London, privately in my office, and essentially saying to me, Emmett-san, we're doomed. Everything's, what should we do? And 25 years later, or 30 years later, or whatever it is, Hitachi really has turned itself around. And this discipline is absolutely vital. Now, we've got 1 minute left. Let me just ask you, each of you, to give one piece of advice to whatever new government emerges from the election in February. Maybe start with you, Niinami-san. Is there one big thing that you would like to leave this webinar thinking this is what this government must do?
Well, I think be responsible for the outcome to the future because we think more of the young generation, and they do. So, and don't talk about only two short-term, solution.
Right. So have a real proper vision, or at least to give a sense of a vision to the people. Jesper, final words to you, and then I must close.
Inheritance tax reform. Japan is going to see over the next decade about 750 trillion yen of money being transferred, from the mattress money into the next generation. The inheritance tax system here is, built to just make accountants at the Ministry of Finance happy by paying down debt, rather than actually using this unstucking of the mattress money to actually invest in the future. Japan needs inheritance tax reform, should have a good look at the Scandinavian countries which did that, and as a result of that have seen some very positive impact on the economy.
Great suggestion. Well, thank you both for a great conversation. To Takeshi Niinami, to Jesper Koll, and to all of the wonderful audience who've been with us today. Thank you so much for supporting both the Japan Society and Asia Society Japan. And please come back to our next quarterly seminar. But also, I wish you all a great rest of the year, of course, and thank again Takeshi Niinami and Jesper Koll for sharing our time and making this today such fun. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Bill.
Arigato.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jesper.
Thank you.
Good night.